Hey everybody, it's time for Fight Quest stories to continue. This one's Kyokushin in Tokyo, Japan. It was the third episode we filmed, I believe, and it was the third one shown. So it was shown in order. So we had a couple episodes under our belt, understanding the format and the way it was working. But in order to understand my mentality at the time, I have to go into kind of a different story here. There was a fighter on the local scene in California named Jeremy Williams. He was part of Team Next Generation, which was Chris Brennan's camp. And I went to the first Gladiator Challenge show ever. I was with Team Punishment at the time. I just started MMA. And Gladiator Challenge and King of the Cage were two biggest probably, local shows in California. Everybody went through Gladiator Challenge and King of the Cage, who came up in California at that time. I saw Carl Parisian, Diego Sanchez, Dean Lister, Jeremy Horn. Everybody fought in one of those two promotions. They went back and forth. So I went to the first Gladiator Challenge event. So I had some teammates fighting on it. And I saw this guy, Jeremy Williams, fight. And he was like a level better than everybody. He was one of the few guys there that you're like, whoa. This is like 2001. So a lot of blue belts doing like the Hoist Gracie takedown who only knew one thing. You know, it was almost style versus style still a little bit. And Jeremy was just great. He was an excellent fighter. Smoked a guy named Chris Champagne. And I saw him and I went, whoa, this guy's good. Like, whew, I hope I get to be that good. And fast forward a few years, I took him on at a submission grappling tournament. And it was a super fight. Me and him, they shut off all lights and put the light on the ring. It was just me and him. And he's a lot bigger than me. We didn't weigh in or anything. And I beat him with a toe hold. I'll include the link underneath this video. It's on YouTube if you want to see it. Anyway, I won. Big upset. Sweet. I was happy, and I shook his hand. I hugged him, and I went in the back. Well, I go to my team. We're all excited and stuff, and I go in the back to see him, and he's sitting on the floor, and his whole team's around him, and he's sobbing, just inconsolable, weeping. And I remember thinking at the time, something's wrong here. Like, yeah, it sucks to lose at a super fight tournament. I mean, it stinks. But he was just, like, bawling. And I walked up to him, and I got on the floor with him, and I hugged him, and I went like, dude, I'm a huge fan. Like, you're part of the reason I do MMA. Like, seeing you was like, man, if I can be that good. And you're an inspiration to me, man. And which is true. You know, I wasn't bullshitting the guy. And I hugged him. He said, no, he said, man, I love you. I've been watching you grapple for a while too, man. And we had our moment, but I remember thinking something's not right here. Something's not right. Like, usually you wouldn't be that devastated about losing a grappling tournament, you know? And so anyway, I would run into him grappling tournaments and stuff. We'd always joke about it. Like, he'd point to his ankle and like flip me off. And he always had his daughter with him. He had a baby girl. And, you know, we'd chit-chat. Our fighters sometimes would fight each other at grappling tournaments. I was teaching at the time. And we'd always chit-chat or whatever and catch up. And the day I landed in Japan to do Kyokushin, he killed himself. He committed suicide. I don't know him well enough to know what happened and what was going on. Like, the whole team, Next Generation, dogs, Chris Brennan, like Bao Quach and Tracy Hess and Adam Lin. I know all those guys, but we're acquaintances. I don't know them well enough to go, you know, what happened with Jeremy. But he killed himself in his car, shot himself. And so I was like, whoa. I remember being in the van going to the hotel, which the airport in Tokyo is pretty far outside of Tokyo. It's a drive. And just kind of being in like this, like reading about it and just kind of being in this like haze. And everybody's catching up, all the producers and everything. And, you know, it had been a couple weeks since we'd seen each other. And I was just kind of like out of it. And it wasn't that I knew Jeremy that well. I didn't. You know, we were acquaintances and I liked him, but I wasn't devastated. I didn't know him that personally. Jeremy was religious. He was sleeved up on his arms and legs, and a lot of them were Bible verses he would have tattooed on him. So I'm not religious at all. He's religious. I didn't have any family. He had a daughter, baby girl. And I just remember thinking, like, he has all these grounding things I don't have. I'm a lifelong atheist. I don't believe in a sentient universe that's looking out for you and God has a plan. I don't believe in any of those things. So the fact that he did, and yet was so low he killed himself, And it was just stunning to me, where I don't have those grounded things. When things go wrong for me, I don't think anybody has a plan for me, or the universe is going to help me out. I don't believe in that stuff. So the idea that someone with those fallbacks chose to end his life was just, and I don't know the details. I don't know why. It wasn't that he had a terminal disease or something like that. It was, I've heard things, but it really threw me for a loop my first day in Japan. And I know it's kind of a side story if you want to hear about Fight Quest, and this is kind of a tangent, but that's where my headspace was when I landed in Tokyo. I was like, just dealing with that, like, not like I was mourning, but it was just so confusing, and that's where it was my first day in Japan. It was like this haze, and I had to kind of like get out of it quickly, because I'm like, dude, you got to fight, you got to train, you got to be on. People don't understand when you're doing a show, whether it's you're calling UFC or if you're doing a television show, you got to be on and animated and active, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in other episodes, but you got to be, you can't be exhausted and depressed, and you got to be like animated and up and engaging the audience and the people around you. So that's where my headspace was. My first day, I had to like, okay, you're jet lagged, just sleep a lot, whatever you got to do, just be ready for tomorrow. So for those of you who've never been to Tokyo, that's just the start of the story. So for those of you who've never been to Tokyo, it's almost, I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from Southern California, Central and Southern California. And LA is really spread out. You don't really hit a skyscraper until you get to downtown LA. Century City has a couple, whatever. But it's really spread out. Manhattan is all skyscrapers, but it's 13 miles long. Tokyo is like LA spread out with Manhattan's density. So you hit skyscrapers and you aren't anywhere near the center of Tokyo. I mean, when you drive into Tokyo, it's like, oh, we must be near. And they're like, no, we have another like 20 miles. It was crazy. It's the scale of Tokyo as a city. That and Mexico City are the most populous greater metropolitan areas in the world, are Tokyo and Mexico City. And it's just like, it's crazy. You're like driving and driving and driving, and everything looks like downtown. Everything looks like the center, because it's like these huge skyscrapers and office buildings and stuff, but you're nowhere near the center. So the scale of Tokyo is really amazing. I had never been there before. I don't think Doug had never been there before. And so that was the first thing you notice, is the scale of Tokyo is like off the charts. So we get there, we did a day of, once again, the first day is jet lag, you don't do anything. Second day, we're on the streets, like, the food, and also the food in Tokyo is amazing. Not only is it great sushi and Japanese food, obviously, it's a metropolitan city, so you can get pretty much anything you want anytime you want it. Great Indian food, there are American joints, or all there's a wide variety. But I love Japanese food, so it was awesome. And the sushi there is cheap by comparison, because although things are more expensive in Tokyo generally, sushi is like a delicacy in America. It's here. Well, sushi is their normal food a lot of places. So a lot of times you can eat sushi cheaper in Japan than you can in LA. So I was eating sushi 3 times a day, and I loved it. So we're on the street, and one of the interesting things culturally about Japan is there are just things that are weird to a Westerner. Number one is Doug forgot, I think, like a phone charger or something. He forgot something electronic that was really simple. Like, I forgot my phone charger. I forget what it was. And we were trying to find a store that had a phone charger. Well, when you walk up to somebody on the street in Tokyo and you're like, excuse me, we're trying to find, they just kind of like, in my experience, they would like just bow and like walk away from you. Like, when you're trying to get like some help, and like they're so polite that they don't want to bother you, and they just kind of go and would walk away from us and stuff like that. We ran into that all the time. And our translator, our fixer, later told me, she goes, no, you don't understand. If they don't speak English really well, it's considered insulting to try to speak English. Even if they speak English and they understand what you want, for them to respond and not speak perfect English is like an insult here. So they would rather just go, oh, I don't, and walk away from you. I was like, really? And she goes, yeah, no, it's kind of a thing here. So like, those are just cultural idiosyncrasies. I was there. I didn't deal with this, but Doug, when he went up to the mountains, was in a spa or there are a lot of saunas. That's a big deal there. And they wouldn't let him in because he had tattoos. That's still a Yakuza thing over there. So you're not allowed into, they wouldn't let him in, or like everybody else left. Like, he says, I went to the sauna, everybody left. So we ran into like some obviously some cultural stuff that was very different. It was interesting. One We had fun though. So we're going around Tokyo and getting some street stuff and checking all the stuff out. And also another interesting thing, we both started out in the center, like in the Shinjuku area, neighborhood of Tokyo. And that's where we both were until we split up. And another weird thing that was strange, at night in Shinjuku, which is kind of like the party area, it'd be like the West Hollywood of Tokyo, seeing a businessman in a full suit, like an executive, frat boy passing out drunk was not weird at all. It happened all the time. In America, if somebody's like that drunk in public, they're usually not wearing a suit, right? They're usually wearing a tank top or something, or they're shirtless. But it was like like businessmen getting just passed out on the ground. And once again, our fixer, who's from Tokyo, is like, the culture here is very rigid and structured and, success. One of the few things a person can do to really cut loose is drink like a motherfucker. So these executives work 20-hour days, but it's socially acceptable on the weekends to get blasted way beyond what, like, if your boss saw you blasted on the streets of Shinjuku in America, that's not okay. Generally, it's frowned upon. She goes, here it's culturally okay to just lose your mind on the weekends because they're under so much stress during the week. So we saw that a lot too. We'd be in the streets of Shinjuku and I'm like, dude, is this guy okay? I mean, staggering, passing out, and they're like, oh yeah, no, that's not that weird here. So that was weird. That stood out. So finally, we did a lot of street stuff, the food and meeting people and all this stuff. And they did the Kyokushin demonstration. And they did this brick breaking, but it was ice. And it was these gigantic, it's on the show, these gigantic blocks of ice. And I'm telling you, it was a 100% real. We saw them put it up. It wasn't cut in any way. There weren't any like nicks in the ice, like, okay, it should break easily. None of that. It was real. And so all the breaking stuff you saw in there, which is new to me, I never did that stuff, was real. It's 100% real. They didn't cut anything for us. The ice that guy crushed with his forearm was totally real. It wasn't altered in any way. So they did this, the demonstration. Doug goes up in the mountains. I stay in the city with Master Goda and his dojo in Tokyo. So Kyokushin and the things we dealt with in Kyokushin were a microcosm of things we'd have to deal with later in the show. The first thing is, any style that had a combative world championships, for example, was easy to do. Because what are we training in? Kyokushin. What's the final fight in? Kyokushin. What are the rules? Kyokushin rules. Like, they have a system already. If you watch the first two of these, one of the issues we had, for example, in Kung Fu in China was the final fight was in Sanda. I didn't train in Sanda at the temple I was staying in. That whole chi thing where they smash that thing on my stomach, I didn't prepare for that at all. We did it at the end, but I didn't prepare for it. So there was a disconnect between what I did at the temple and what I had to do at the end of the show. In the Philippines, it was stick, hands, and knives. I did almost no hand training. And the knife thing they kind of made up at the end. We're going to put a red thing on the knife, and that's how we're going to do it. And then the hand fight, they kind of made up in the end. They didn't really know how we were going to do it. So there was, once again, a disconnect between what I was training and what I did at the end of the show. It was kind of like we were trying to mix and match and figure out what to do. This is simple. We're going to do Kyokushin. We're going to fight in Kyokushin. You're going to train in Kyokushin. Okay, great. So we go to Master Go to School. It's really cool, old wooden dojo in the middle of Tokyo. And the guys there were legit. The style's legit. For those who don't know the rules, you can't punch to the face or elbow to the face, and that's it. So you punch to the body with everything you got, and then you can kick to the head. So the one thing about Kyokushin that you learn very quickly that you have to get used to is they can kick you in the head from, like, body punching range. They really can. If you look at, there was a kickboxer guy that I used to train with while I was doing fight, was this British guy out of the South Bay. And he would, every time I do a style, like, oh, I'm going to do Kyokushin next week. He's like, oh, cool. And he'd show me a little Kyokushin. And one thing he said, he goes, a Krokop's kick? And I went, yeah. And he goes, that's kind of a Kyokushin kick. It just comes in like that. It's not a Thai kick that has a big loop on it. Like, it's wham. It's very hard to see. And that's one thing, the way he described it, because that's one of the reasons Krokop's kick is so hard to see, is it comes up at an angle that's very hard to deal with. It's hard to see before it hits you. Kyokushin kicks are like that. So one thing I learned very quickly, keep your damn hands up. Because you might think you're out of kicking range or too close for kicking range, and that thing will come over the top and nail you. So the training was 100% legit. The things that were hardest for me, the actual sparring was okay. I've done that before. Had a lot of fun doing it. The breaking, which I wasn't used to at all, never done any of the breaking stuff, and I had never done that. And then that was tough. And then the katas and forms. I've never done katas, and I'm shadowboxed, but katas and forms, anything I had to memorize, where I don't do that stuff. I didn't grow up in traditional martial arts, so I've never done that. So I found those things difficult. I looked pretty goofy doing that. But the actual training was 100% legit. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. A couple things. When I first got to the gym, we're training, and then he goes, remember, Master Goda doesn't speak any English, so our translator is telling me all this stuff. He turns to me and he goes, something in Japanese. And our translator goes, he wants you to try this curry. There was an Indian guy I was training with there who made it in the gym. And part of the initiation for the gym is to eat this curry. I am an adventurous eater. I am from Southern California, so I'm used to hot, spicy food. I love Indian, I love Mexican, I love Thai. I've been all over the world. I've eaten everything. This is the hottest food I have ever put in my mouth by a factor of 5 to 10. It was eating lava. So, but it's an initiation to see if you can do it, or how much you can do, I guess. So once you tell me that, I'm just going to buckle down and do it. Like, it's just, fine, this is going to suck. And so I'm sitting there eating it, and you can feel it burning all the way through my mouth and my throat and like tracing down through my stomach. It was that hot. And I look around, and the other guys in the gym who are eating it too, they have towels over their heads, and they're like meditating and like rocking back and forth to like block out the pain. They're sweating. And I'm sitting there, I mean, it was like over rice or something. And so I'm just like shoveling it, like, okay, screw it. The faster I eat it, the sooner it's gonna be over. And Master Goda turns to me and he goes, and my instructor goes, my translator goes, you're very strong. He said, some people pass out and have to be taken to the hospital and have their stomach pumped. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So anyways, like, hey, good for you. You're still conscious. And so I finished it, but that was part of my initiation for the gym. And another thing to keep in mind is K1 was still really big in Japan at this point. And a lot of those fighters were Kyokushin fighters, have background in Kyokushin, or done some Kyokushin. So when I would talk to Master Goda and his number one student, we'd have a lot of K1 talk. A lot of talk about how Kyokushin translates when they have to fight K1 guys. And what I liked about Master Goda is he was very upfront about it. He goes, oh yeah, he goes, they need a lot of adjustments to fight Muay Thai fighters and kickboxers because we don't punch to the face. We have good kicks, but they're not used to guarding their face, and they're not used to punching to the head. So it takes a lot of practice to get them good against K1 guys that can do everything. And he was very upfront about it. A lot of times when I'd be doing these styles, like, oh, style's number one and we can beat anybody. Goda was like, no, I mean, if they can punch the head and you can't, and you're not used to it, you're going to get knocked out. So, we have to teach them a lot of boxing, but their kicks were amazing. They were really good. And there was a lot of like knuckle toughening because they have gis and hit to the body. And if you know anything about those gis, it roughs up your knuckles and you got to hit really hard to kind of get through the cloth and all this stuff. So there was a lot of that, a lot of neck strengthening and stuff. Training was legit though. And so after that, there was a big dinner we had. And I'll remember this for the rest of my life. We had a big dinner at this, like, if you were to set design a restaurant in Tokyo, it would look like this. If you were to like a kung fu movie and we need a dinner in a restaurant in Tokyo, it would look like this. Just, it was all wood and it had all these, like the characters hanging from the wall and everything was bamboo and it was awesome. It had this like pit in the middle and they seated us around the pit and it was maybe 10 of us. It was Master Goda, a bunch of his students and a couple of production people. And we had this amazing dinner, and the centerpiece of the dinner was this big turtle soup, and they had the shell of the turtle in the soup, and like they had cooked it all together, and it was this big bubbling thing, and once again, like a kung fu movie, and just dish after dish of these like of dumplings and sushi and all this stuff, and ganbai, and I don't drink, but they were all cheering or whatever. And one of the things I had to do that night is another initiation is they have you drink the blood from the turtle we ate, so you have to drink this turtle blood thing. what they usually do is it's like and it's like a pint glass, like a big glass. Half of it's turtle blood, and the other half is like an alcohol of some kind. Well, I don't drink, so they just took turtle blood and apple juice and mixed it together in this big red thing, and they go, you have to drink that. That's part of your initiation. I'm like, all right, and I chugged the whole thing. Basically, it tasted like apple juice. I really, blood doesn't bother me. So it didn't really taste like that. So I just chugged the whole thing. Everybody starts cheering and all this stuff. So this whole time, this dinner is going on. Goda's number one guy, the student, and I are taught, well, he's a fight dork like me. So we're talking about our favorite fighters and our favorite K1 guys, and he doesn't speak a word of English. So our poor translator, my poor translator, is sitting in the middle of us translating this entire, like, dorky fight conversation. And I actually turned and was like, God, I'm really sorry you have to do this. And she's like, no, I find this fascinating. Like, this is awesome. Like, I kind of get to learn all about fighting and talking about our favorite K1 fighters and so-and-so and Andy Hugh and this and that. And it's a great conversation. So I heard about this later at the end of the dinner. And the guy who owned this place looked like, once again, the Kung Fu movie owner of a restaurant. He was a big, fat, bald guy. And he had like the traditional Japanese attire on, like a robe that was like silk, and he was talking to my producer, and apparently he was telling my producer about his wife and all his girlfriends, and his girlfriends and his wife get along and all this stuff, and his crazy household, and he loves Master Goda and all this stuff. So my producer's like, I want to be this guy. This guy has the life I want to live. So, but full of stories about, the life in Tokyo and all this stuff. And at the end, apparently, I found this out later, my producer goes to pay for the meal, and the owner goes, Master Goda doesn't pay here. His people don't pay here. And the producer went, no, you don't understand. This is part of the production budget. We're paying, not Master Goda. It's part of the production budget. And he goes, maybe you didn't hear me. And you don't pay. I'm not joking. In Tokyo, we must have eaten $1,000 worth of food. I mean, I don't remember how many courses came. I don't remember how much everybody drank, but they drank a lot. And remember, this is the heart of Tokyo, and he refused to take the money. So incredible story, but amazing dinner. So the next day, one of the things we did is I had to break a baseball bat with a kick because we're going all these kicks and stuff, and I had trained a lot of Muay Thai and kickboxing. I hadn't trained Kyokushin, so the angle of the kicks I had to learn. And they wanted to make sure I could do it, and so they get this baseball bat. And I heard at the time, I don't know if it's still up, but on the YouTube of the show, people were saying that the bat must have been altered in some way. It wasn't at all, and I was freaking out. I've never broken anything except somebody else's face. I'm a Muay Thai guy. I trained in Muay Thai. I was a mixed martial artist. Anything. So they unwrapped this bat. I mean, they unwrap it in front of you. There was nothing to modify. They unwrapped it. And they said, okay, don't worry, it breaks like a chopstick. And I'm like, okay, I'm worried I'm going to break my shin, more than break the bat. So anyway, they unwrap it, and there was a scene where I kick it and it whacks the camera. Well, a lot of people thought that was evidence that it was a setup or something. What had happened was they were just trying to time it, right? They were just trying to get the angle at which they wanted to film it. They didn't want me to kick it right then, and I didn't understand. I thought they wanted me to kick it. So they held it, and I said, okay, I guess I'm supposed to kick it. And I kicked it, and they weren't holding it hard enough. And it flew out of his hand and hit the camera. Well, the camera guy had told them, look, just hold it so I know what angle to shoot it at. And I didn't know that, so I tried to kick it. So that's why you have that little scene. Anyway, they hold the thing, and they kick all the way through it. And I know one thing I know just from training period is don't hesitate. Go all the way through it and the best you can. And I did, and it broke. That was very impressive. I impressed myself quite a bit. Wasn't sure I could do that. So I kicked through the baseball bat. That was totally real. They didn't cut it. They didn't modify the bat in any way. I was standing there the whole time. So that was real. Then they had me do they were like roofing tiles. They had stacked a bunch of them, and they wanted me to chop all the way through it. And once again, I'm not used to chopping stuff or breaking things, but it's the same philosophy as hitting pads, where you want to go through the pad. You don't stop at the pad. You go through the pad. And so that was the thing. So, lean all the way into it and visualize going all the way through it. And I got through most of them, and then I had to do it again and get through the rest of them. But stuff like that was interesting, because I'd never done stuff like that before. So I trained in Kyokushin, sparred a lot, fought a lot of different guys, had a lot of fun doing it. They were really great guys. And anyway, so the next issue that kind of came up was something that would dog Fight Quest throughout its run. So training, and then he came down. And once again, that's real. I don't see Doug for 5 days. I have no idea what's going on. Every now and then, sometimes you'd hear a little rumor or something from, like, you know, the sound guy or something. Oh, they say Doug's doing this, this, and that. But really, they didn't really tell me anything. So Doug comes back, and he walks into the dojo, and his ear is black. It's black. And I'm like, what happened? So he told me the story where they were sparring. And a lot of what we did is, you know, you'd spar 3 or 4 guys in a row or whatever, okay, because our final fight was going to be 5 guys in a row. So we would spar guys in a row. Well, Doug told me he was sparring this guy. They were out in some field or something. And he goes, the guy kicked me in the head. And the next thing I knew, his instructor had one of those, like, rattan sticks, like the old, you know, almost like a kendo stick, and would, you know, encourage you with the stick. Come on, let's go, poke you, whatever. And the way Doug told the story, he goes, the guy kicked me, and the next thing I know, I opened my eyes, and somebody's hitting me with a stick, and I'm standing up, and I went, why is this guy trying to hit me? And he was sparring, and he had been knocked down and out, apparently. Woke up again, got up, and, you know, the master's hitting him, like, come on, keep going. And so he goes, I don't really remember why I'm there. I don't realize what's going on. And, oh, God, this guy's trying to hit me. And, you know, he goes, you know, I fought back or whatever, but nothing's making any sense to me. And then they ended up doing this run through the mountains. And he goes, halfway through the run, his right eye turned off. He went blind in his right eye as he was running. And this is right after getting knocked down and knocked out. And he was, I couldn't see anything out of my right eye and whatever. I just kept running. And then after the run, I don't know when, it came back. So there was some swelling back here that hit his optic nerve and he couldn't see anymore. That's a concussion, folks. And a mild one, probably, from what he told me. So I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, did you get dizzy? Did you feel nauseous? And he goes, a little, but not that bad. And I was like, what you have to understand about Fight Quest is they had no advisors or medical experts there except me. And I'm not with Doug. So anyway, you know, this was a consistent problem, is that Doug was concussed slightly. And Doug had his bell rung. If that happens in a sparring session in the United States, sparring's over for you. You're not sparring anymore. Probably not sparring for a few days, at least. You might get a concussion check or whatever. No one there, the producers there don't know that he's mildly concussed and that he shouldn't be fighting anymore. They have no idea. And so, anyway, so that was number one. I was like, dude, that's probably a mild concussion, dude. You shouldn't have continued sparring. You certainly shouldn't have been running. Couldn't go to sleep for a few hours, but they didn't know that. He could have gone to bed and his marbles would be totally scrambled. You're not supposed to sleep after a concussion. And I was just like, oh, fuck. You know, they don't know that stuff. They have no idea. So he came back. Also, his knee was the size of a goddamn grapefruit. He had been kicked in the leg or something, and his knee was gigantic. And he showed it to me, and he'd like barely pull his pants over it. You know, he was pulling his pants up and like they would catch on his knee. And I'm like, oh shit. So we go back to our hotel, my hotel, which was this little like very Japanese, like wooden thing with a little tiny mattress on it, like Japanese style and everything. Totally comfortable, but very Japanese. So we're sitting on the floor, and the producer, a guy named Toby, we're sitting there, and he goes, and so it was partly a conversation just for my producer, to tell him what's going on, and part of it was a discussion they were filming. So I don't remember what was on camera and what wasn't, but he was like, so what's wrong with Doug's knee? And I went, how the fuck should I know what's wrong with Doug's knee? I'm not a doctor. There could be 5 different things wrong with Doug's knee. It could be ACL, MCL, meniscus. I don't know. It's this big. There could be a ton of fluid in there. I have no clue what's wrong with Doug's knee. Patella could be messed up. There are a million things that could be wrong with the knee. And I don't know what they are. And it would take an MRI to figure it out, and we're fighting tomorrow. And so we had this back and forth real discussion about whether or not Doug could fight, whether or not he should fight. But it was that thing of like, guys, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's wrong with his knee. I have some guesses, but I don't know. And he didn't go to a doctor. They didn't take him to a hospital. They didn't take him to a doctor. It was, okay, he'll fight tomorrow. And it doesn't say it, I don't think. I haven't watched it in a long time. The rule in the final, we fought 5 guys in a row. That was, Kumite was our final thing for the Kyokushin episode. And they weren't allowed to kick Doug in the knee. That's why they never go after his knee, because it was huge. It was badly swollen. And the only rule was he can fight, but you can't kick him in the knee. And they all went, okay, cool, because, leg kicks aren't a huge part of Kyokushin like Muay Thai or anything. But that was a hint of things to come with the show, in that us getting hurt or us being incapacitated or us having a physical problem meant great TV. It meant sweet to them, to the producers. And I'm going, dude, Doug might not be able to walk. Doug didn't have a lot of fight experience, so he didn't always know when he was hurt. He didn't always grasp the significance of how badly he was hurt. He hadn't done that before. If I get knocked down and I can't remember why I'm there, I'm going to go, I have a concussion. And I'll get to that in a minute. I did do that. And, I've been around the fight game enough to know I can't spar anymore. Time out. I should not be getting hit in the head right now. To put that on a fighter shouldn't happen. The producers need to step in and go, dude, he can't fight anymore. And another thing they didn't understand, and once again, there'll be more of this later, the decorum of martial arts doesn't allow me to turn to Master Goda and go, I'm not doing that. If he says you got to fight 6 guys, I got to fight 6 guys. If I'm if I have an instructor and they tell me to do something, I have to do it. The decorum of martial arts doesn't let a student go, I'm not doing that. I'm concussed. I can't keep going. The producer's not the student. The producer can step in and go, whoa, we can't have our talent, crippled. But they didn't know when to do that, and it's good for the show if they don't do that. So that tension between what is great for the show and what keeps us healthy enough to keep filming, what was a problem that would rear its head a lot in this show. And there'll be much more of that later. But this was the first inkling of it, where I'm sitting there going, he needs an MRI. I don't know what's wrong with his knee. Well, we don't have time to get an MRI. We're fighting tomorrow morning. And stuff like that. So I was kind of, in many ways, probably a pain in the ass about certain things. Because they were kind of like, oh, it's a great show if he's limping in fights like fucking Karate Kid. And I'm like, dude, but he could just permanently screw his knee up, Or he could need surgery that's so bad that we can't film the next 4 or 5 episodes. They had no appreciation for that. So anyway, we do the final fight. So the final fight, if you haven't seen it, was Kumite. We fought 4 guys in a row. None of them one guy was in my weight class. The rest were big dudes. Big guys. I don't remember if I fought first or Doug fought first. I don't remember. But we both fought 5 guys in a row. Now, this is another thing that would rear its head later. Whenever there was an ordeal at the end of a fight, when you had to fight 5 guys or 10 guys or whatever it might be, I had gone through that kind of stuff in MMA, because when you're getting ready for a fight, you call it Shark Tank, call it whatever you want, a gauntlet, you fight fresh guys. So you'll do 5 5-minute rounds, and each time a new person jumps in, you spar 5 5-minute rounds. So they just spar 1 round, you spar 5. So I was kind of used to that. And one of the rules of that is you don't go hard with everybody. You pick your moments to go hard, and then you're defensive, or you try not to get killed, depending on who you're fighting and depending on how tired you are. Doug had never been through any of that stuff. He's never been through a real fight camp. So Doug only had 1 gear, which was go as hard as you can every time. Well, against 5 guys, 5th guy's going to kill you if you do that. And Doug's ability to pace himself in a professional way wasn't there yet. I'm not insulting Doug, because Doug had never been through that before. So they lined me up with my 5 guys, and they're huge. And the one guy who wasn't huge was Goda's number 1 guy, the guy I was talking to. And that dude had skills. Crazy skills, man. So, anyway, in one of the fights, the guy was 6'4", and I thought I had my hands up pretty high, and he hit a kick right over the top of my guard, and it knocked me down. I remember at the time, I wasn't concussed. It wasn't it wasn't that it hit me I was whoa. I remember the weight of his leg, because he was 6'4", so his whole leg kind of landed on me, and it kind of flung me to the ground. I remember that feeling of not so much this, but whoa, and it flung me to the ground. It was so heavy, and I got up and kept fighting. It was no big deal. And so we're going back and forth, back and forth, and then and we'd stop, and the next guy would come in. I forget how long the rounds were, but the final guy was the number 2 Kyokushin heavyweight in the world. He was from Bulgaria. he was a giant, right? And it's my last fight. So I've already gone through 4 of these guys. And I'm going, okay, give it everything you got. And I said to myself before the fight started, I'm going to stay so close to him that he's going to have trouble, A, really getting distance on a punch, and to stay away from those kicks that, A, he's really good at. I don't want to be at that kind of range. I'd rather be just like underneath, right in the pocket in his chest where he's going to have trouble hitting me with those. So that was my goal for the final fight of the Kumite, was like stay chest to chest so he can't really use his power. And I did some head movement, and I get inside. And I remember it was like being in a tent. His gi was so big that it was like around me. Like I remember that feeling of it being like a tent around me. And I remember I ripped a 5 or 6 punch combination. I went bam, 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 bam on his ribs. Bam. And he leaned in, and he was right in my ear, and he goes, good one. And he hit me with an uppercut right to the ribs that like lifted me off the ground. Boom! And I was like, son of a bitch. And so he lifted me off the ground with a shot. And that naturally kind of moved me back a little bit. So I step off to the side and I leg kick him. Boom. Thing was to the legs. Anyway, I ripped a pretty good tie kick. Boom. And he goes, same thing. Good one. And he hit me with a shot to the ribs that moved me over like 3 feet. Boom. I remember it was like a bull hit me in the side. And so, but every time I would try and kind of get back to that distance where he's going to have trouble using his power. And it ended. I made it to the end of the fight. And so Doug's fight, he fell down a couple times. And not only did he get hit in the head a couple times, he had trouble stabilizing on that knee. Obviously, it was freaking huge. So we finish our fights. They lift us up, and it was like this big moment where like we're embraced by this community and stuff. And that was really fun. And our fixers were all women, or our translators were all women. Doug's was and mine. And they came up to us after the fight, and they're crying. And I remember she came on, she's crying, and I go, what's wrong? And she goes, we didn't know how real this was. We had no idea how real this was. And oh my God, like they were terrified watching us fight these guys, because gotta remember that like they're watching us train, but they don't know if it's a demonstration at the end or if it's like some fakey bullshit at the end. And it was 100% real. And they were just like, oh my God, like, you become friends with these people. Or, hanging out with them for whatever it was, 10 days. So they were like just terrified the whole time that we were going to get killed or whatever. And like, oh my God, like they didn't realize it was a real fight. And, I just hugged her and I was like, no, it's okay. It's what we do, So I go up to the producer and I say, we need concussion checks. And he says, well, how do you know? And I go, we both got hit in the head and fell down. We need concussion checks. And he said, how do you feel? And I go, it doesn't matter how I feel. I could feel fine. Like, that's what happens when you get hit. I shouldn't be judging whether or not I'm okay. I'm telling you, somebody else needs to judge that we're okay. And so after we had that discussion, and once again, this is the kind of discussions I had to have. They didn't have any idea that you should automatically get a concussion check after a hard fight like that. And so anyway, they took it to the hospital for a concussion check. And Doug's in the waiting room, and he blew his nose, and his cheek started expanding. And he goes, Jimmy. And it was like there was an air bubble in his cheek. And I pushed on it, and it felt like Rice Krispies, like this cracking sound. And I went, you cracked your sinus. You cracked something in your face, at least your sinuses. And so air is leaking out into your cheek. And I pushed it back in, and anyway, I was like, yeah, no, he cracked something in there. And so the doctor checked us out. We didn't have concussions. He checked us out, light pen and all that stuff. I'm like, do you remember? And he goes, no, you seem fine. And I asked the doctor about this, 'cause the doctor looked and he goes, there's nothing we can do about a little crack and a little fracture in there. It's just going to have to heal. So Doug was sitting there like this, and it would blow up, and he'd push it back in, and he would breathe and make this funny sound, and he'd push it back in. But they were like, look, it's just going to have to come back. So that's what happened with Doug. That's how Kyokushin worked. And then we had what they call the rain days for a couple days after that. And we got to hang around Tokyo, and there was, I forget what it was called. Me and my translator went to this thing called, I want to say Kittyland. That sounds worse than it is. It's a toy store there that's 4 stories. And I think that's what it's called. And each story has its own theme. So one's all anime, and the other one's all electronics, and the other one's all these different toy themes. And it's freaking awesome. It's really cool. And they have all these toys that, like, just didn't exist in the United States. Like, they had this little box, and there was a person in the box, okay? So these things were like $30 a piece or whatever. There's a little electronic box, a little screen on it. And what it does is this person's jumping rope. All right, so they're jumping rope, and they're jumping rope all these different ways. So there's a little character in this box. Then they'd sell another box that had whatever, like a swordsman. Okay, so this person's playing with a sword. Well, you buy the two and you connect them, and they go into each other's boxes. And like the one will be jumping rope, and the swordsman will come in and cut the rope, and then the person will tie it together and hit the swords. Like they'll start interacting. It's like a fish tank. So like you put these electronic characters together, and they'll start interacting. Well, each one you buy, they'll go into each other's homes and interact with each other. So you can have like a whole wall of these characters all interacting with each other. It was insane. Like, I never seen anything like that at the time. Remember, this is quite a few years ago. But yeah, like these crazy toys, and it was awesome. I had a really good time in Japan. So, also, we were out one night. It was us and our translator. So, Doug might have been there. I don't remember. Or maybe just our producer. I don't remember. And our translator, we finished, and I go, let me walk you to the subway. Because, Tokyo has a subway system, whatever. And this is like midnight. And she looks at me, she goes, why? And I go, well, I don't, it's a big city. And she goes, this is Tokyo. There's no crime here. Like, women can walk to the subway at 1 a.m. and know nothing is going to happen. And she told me this story that she had passed out in Shinjuku drunk and woke up, and her purse and her wallet were sitting on top of one, and like someone had stacked it so she wouldn't lose it. And she woke up and people were like walking around her like, oh, sorry, not to step on her. And all her stuff was like neatly stacked next to her. And she goes, no, there's no crime here. So it was interesting, but a lot of fun. Wasn't my first time that was my first time in Tokyo, but it wasn't my last time. And I've always had a good time there. But doing Kyokushin was our first self-contained episode that had a style that was legit, training that was totally legit, a final fight that was totally legit, where we didn't have to powwow as a production and figure out how we were going to do it. And that was the most fun. But like I said, for future episodes, it was the first one where we got a hint of the issues that might crop up later about our safety, about Doug's safety, about how the final fight was going to be treated vis-a-vis our physical health. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy. That was Kyokushin, and stay tuned for the next one because they're going to keep coming.